This is Uncommonly Remarkable, where we discuss the surprising everyday lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. My name is Artis Beatty. I am a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for MyEyeDr OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and the conversations held here are separate from my work with MyEyeDr. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Uncommonly Remarkable. Today's special guest is a physician and co-CEO of Triangle Functional Medicine. He describes himself as a spouse, a father, and a health span enthusiast. Expect to learn about optimizing the external and internal aging process, with stops along the way, though, to include maybe a lesson in tap dancing, personal training, acting, and maybe even something about a TV show you might remember called The Battle Dome. Everyone, please welcome my friend, Carson Shearer, to the show. Carson, it is fantastic to have you. Thank you for taking time out to join us.
Hey, Artis, excited to be here. I appreciate you inviting me here to share.
I think there's a lot that we want to talk about. Most of it, I think, extremely entertaining. But we're going to start by going backwards just a bit. I want to learn a little bit more about where you started and what drove you to where you are today. So we know that you are the co-CEO of Triangle Functional Medicine. That is, in the grand scheme of things, career-wise, relatively new for you. So can you talk a little bit about your practice now and maybe give a little background on how you got there?
Sure. Let's see. So I started Triangle Functional Medicine about 3 years ago on my own and have been the lone provider since that time. And our focus has been, I've continued to practice what I call internal medicine, which is where my training is through. So I manage a lot of chronic comorbidities, diabetes, weight, but I do it with a little bit different lens. When we hear this term functional, oftentimes it's kind of used synonymously with integrative or holistic, and a lot of these lines kind of blur. But I look at it, and you use this word health span on that introduction, but whenever I meet somebody, essentially, I try to figure out what their goals are or what are their acute issues and put focus and emphasis on that, which is, as I describe to people or explain, it's much different than how I came out of med school. I look at a lab panel, LabCorp or Quest says it's out of this reference range, and then here's the box we put you in the appropriate script. So I try to look at how everything works together comprehensively, and if there's any overlap and low-hanging fruit, so to speak, then address that, but really staying focused, centered on what people's acute issues are. And then simultaneously, I always have running in the back of my head most common causes of death and disease, and thinking about how to try to reduce the risk of those and improve the outcome, push those back, if not avoid them altogether.
And I think that term functional medicine, we've heard more often over the course of the last several years than we did for cumulatively years before. And I think there's a little bit of maybe confusion around how that's different than traditional medicine. And I think you start to go down that path, and that traditionally, if you were to go out and see your primary care or other healthcare professional, you would do a battery of tests. The test results would come back with normative data, right? And there would be a comparison of where you are to what would be considered norms. Then you would be selected into a category of, are you normal or abnormal? Then provided some sort of treatment, often prescription-based, not necessarily adaptive change, lifestyle change, those types of things, and then monitored. And where I think functional medicine is maybe different, and maybe you'll expand on that a little bit, is that we're not necessarily looking for categorization, but more optimization. And that some things from a traditional medical perspective that could be considered abnormal may be abnormal, but not in a negative way. And those types of things should be considered whenever you're trying to optimize that person's overall well-being.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think, the challenge or exercise for me over the past few years is uh, minimizing that pendulum swinging. There were times in my life and before medicine where I had a pretty big skepticism or hesitancy towards conventional medicine, pharmaceuticals in particular. But then once you kind of hop through the training, drink the Kool-Aid, you get very engrossed with it in literature and really value and appreciate what our medical complex has to offer. And then more recently, in the past few years, identifying different approaches but still being able to keep the tools that I've used in ultimately coming down to applying what I call individualized medicine, right? And that is for some people a certain medication or a recommendation therapeutic. I may have a much higher threshold for it, and in the right setting for a different person, it may be an appropriate time and place for those medications. So I think kind of evaluating the risk and benefit of each therapy, and whether it's diet, lifestyle, or prescription, or supplement, or some other form of therapy, and applying that to the right person based on their goals or acute issues.
Now you didn't start here. You were in another practice before you decided to build this practice. What drove you from the previous practice to decide you wanted to be on your own and doing this differently?
Yeah, good question. I think ultimately, probably all along going into even medical school, I knew this was kind of the space that I wanted to end up in. At the time when I started working for another practice, it was a great opportunity, and I learned so much from that. But at the time, I thought that was one that maybe, hey, I was going to buy into, take over on my own, and then shortly realized it was a little bit different flavor. That path didn't open up, and knew that ultimately this was the right time for me to go off on my own.
We know that your wife is also a physician, and I think you guys are now going down the path of being in practice together. Is that right?
We are. We're 1 week in, and we're still in speaking terms. We are both excited about that. But yeah, honestly, it's been such a long time coming. We meet maybe 14 plus years ago, and when we first met, didn't know the words functional or integrative. She probably or was familiar with aesthetic medicine, but really didn't know what this was. But we had always talked about managing patients from somewhat of a comprehensive in both that internal and external fashion. So yeah, we've been conservative with the approach, given kids and the course to get here. But yeah, here we are. It's exciting.
Congratulations. Just knowing her and having some conversation with the both of you, I know that it's a big deal for you guys to finally be able to do this together. So I'm glad that you're still on speaking terms a weekend too. That's excellent. So, I think what I've enjoyed a lot around talking to you about the practice is that there are lots of things that come up in a medical practice that are probably common across the breadth of healthcare professions. And you've dealt with all of the things related to hiring and finding the right people and making sure that they're interacting with the patients in the way that you want them to interact. Talk a little bit about your philosophy around the office and how you really approach or expect that care is going to be delivered to the folks that you see.
Yeah, good question. I think tough not to answer that with the idea that we are it's in a service-based industry. It's a cash-based industry. I don't utilize insurance, so there definitely has to be that delivery and care and expectation that exceeds what you typically get in that conventional insurance world, as far as how long I'm going to wait in the wait room and how you're being greeted in that experience in, out, and in between appointments. And with that, I take pride in keeping my patients out of acute issues, whether it's an urgent care or emergency room, but being able to manage that with a scalable business practice. And, I can only manage so many clients and persons. And that's been a fun challenge. It's been a fun challenge. And hopefully I've offered more benefit than harm in keeping people out of acute scenarios. But it's helped stretch me, maybe is the right word. But I think what's also been a little bit of a learning curve is realizing on your own, being able to do everything, do everything, I guess, from top to bottom that a business requires without paying to outsource. Because at the end of the day, we still got to put food on the table and take some of that home. So
That's right.
the staff that I have on board and the team we currently have, I'm really excited about. We've got some very talented individuals working for us, and we certainly expect a lot of each other and of myself, and hopefully continue to grow and keep a strong team and keep our clients happy.
You know, you said something that I think is interesting, and maybe for listeners who are not in healthcare, uh, they may not have caught the significance of it. But you're in a non-third party, non-insurance environment, which is really a risk that you take, right? And so, in the way healthcare generally works is that people have some sort of insurance, be that health insurance, vision insurance, dental insurance. Because they have that insurance, the company has negotiated rates with the physician to be able to see patients that are on that panel. In exchange for that, the physician is listed and the patient is able to find physicians because they are on panel, and that kind of feeds the practice with patients.
Yeah.
And so in your case, when you're working outside of the traditional insurance world, you're not getting that feed of patients from the insurance company into the practice, right? And so talk a little bit about how you thought about that process. And I think some of the things you just mentioned about the quality of the care, the differentiation between how patients experience life in an acute situation or even in traditional offices is a differentiator that's helping to drive your patient base. But how are you thinking about growing the practice over time? And what have you seen since you were in a world where you had patients that were brought to you from an insurance perspective?
Yeah. I think as far as prior to med school, really unaware there was even non-insurance based healthcare offices, facilities, and part of what drove me into medicine to where I am, were watching some family members go through conventional medicine courses and just kind of scratching my head and saying, hey, that didn't feel right. And then some point during medical school, even before residency, after starting to rotate with cardiology, nephrology, family medicine, and surgeons, the one common similarity that I found is not all of them griped about insurance. For exactly what you're saying, right? They just continue moving the goalpost, see more, reimbursed less, and it becomes really a quantity-driven game. So at that point, I remember coming home, I think for a holiday, both my parents and grandparents were there, and they were asking me, hey, what do you think you're going to do? And I'm like, well, I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do, but I remember saying, hey, I'm not going to take insurance. And they both I both got the look from them there. What do you mean? And I kind of shared that with them, but it also helped kind of balance me by seeing that look from my parents, who were probably on, or grandparents rather, on Medicare at that time. So it is, and I describe to people, you know, when I finally got into med school, I worked hard to get in there, and I was in a room full of very bright people, and you know, when I was in the conventional setting, it was, you know, really a numbers game, and you had to see so many people to pay the bills, and then you want to pay off that loan, go on vacation. You got to see even further, so it becomes a quantity-driven game, and how I, you know, kind of explain to people is, I don't care how sharp you are in medicine, top of your class, best sports course, at some point, maybe you can see 30 people a day very efficiently and not drop the ball or miss something. Maybe it's 50, maybe it's 15. But in my setting now, you know, rarely do I see somebody less than 30 minutes. And more often than not, it's closer to 60 minutes. But that affords me the time to be able to ask the right questions or get the right insight and look at things and kind of wrap my head around it a little bit more, so that we can feel more secure about what we'll be in 3 months, in 3 years. So that's what I appreciate. I feel less of a rat race sensation than I did in the past, and I feel a little bit more ethical as far as the thought and consideration and recommendations that I'm giving to people.
That I think that's really important. And you know, I think as listeners are kind of contemplating, okay, so I've heard this term now, functional functional medicine, I'm thinking about my environment, what I'm going through in my day to day. They may have physicians that they really like, or they may be questioning whether they like the options they're being given to take care of themselves. If I'm hearing about functional medicine for the very first time and I'm trying to understand, should I investigate? Is this something for me? What are the things that I would think about or check off on my list before making the decision that maybe it's something I want to explore?
Sure. Well, I guess, and first of all, let me clarify what I was saying before. If you are pleased and you've got a great relationship with your provider, insurance world or not, by all means, keep that. I think it's valuable when you find somebody that can partner with you in your health, whatever setting that is. But as far as saying, hey, is this an avenue I want to look into? I think a lot of people looking into it, discovering that, probably can answer that question relatively quickly as far as what they do currently or historically. Am I currently investing in my health, whether it's foods, whether it's exercise, whether it's the sleep mattress, stress management, any of those things? And then those people that are curious about, hey, is this all there is to offer, right, in this conventional setting? And it doesn't mean you have to be sick or have an ailment necessarily. It's, hey, I just want a little bit different perspective and appreciating, that if you haven't, looked outside, right? If it's like you haven't left the place, the city where you were born growing up, or the state or the country, being able to look a little bit higher, hey, what our medical system offers, it's great. We are great at some things. Mm-hmm. I tell people, if you're having a heart attack or a stroke, you need a joint replacement, this is where you want to be unequivocally. But any other chronic disease management, in my humble opinion, we do a terrible job for it, and we way overpay for it. Mm-hmm. So, this is, I guess, just my perspective based on experiences that I've kind of.
No, I think that's fair, and I actually think that's a brilliant way to look at it, right? Because there are people who are doing everything that they know to do to be healthy, they're trying to optimize their day to day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And in a world where you feel like I'm doing all I can do, and I don't know that I'm getting the advice that I need in order to be the best version of where I am from a health perspective, traditional medicine may not cater to that particular thought level.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in my experience, or what I've learned is that when you get there, then you start to innately look for alternatives, and you can decide that I'm going to try to figure some of this stuff out on my own. I'm going to go out and read studies for myself. Hopefully I'm not going to take internet opinions on things to do. Right. But I do think that's the gap where functional medicine really starts to look at that for people. And I kind of see it as being, if you're going to be the average person, so you're going to be the average 40-something, you're going to be the average 50-something, that means one thing, right? Like, and maybe that's fine for a lot of folks. If you want to be better than the average 40-something or 50-something, then I think you do have to go maybe beyond what you would typically do every day to figure out what those things are that keep you into that category. And that's why I love the health span enthusiast piece, right? Because how far into your aging can you remain healthy and be really at the top of your game?
Yeah. There's something, I think it was, probably even before med school, when you start to appreciate, most birthdays get less exciting after 21. Right. And somewhere in those early mid-20s, there's that awareness that can't change how many times I'm going around the sun. Can't change that birth certificate, but how I feel inside, what lab markers look like, how my joints feel when I wake up in the morning, that internal physiologic age is something that balls in our court, right? And that's something that we can influence. And I don't want to wait until the last year of my life when I'm in my 90s, hopefully hundreds, to influence that. And I think that's that time and effort, discipline that we put in now that hopefully pays forward in those days.
It's so interesting that you talk about it that way, because knowing a little bit about your pre-medical career, I think you've always been involved in health and fitness, but at one point you were doing some personal training, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit more about that because I think I know, but help
Yeah.
me out.
So when I went to undergrad at James Madison University in Virginia, and when I went there, unlike a lot of my colleagues who went to med school, I wasn't exactly sure. Medicine was not top on my radar, but I was in the health assessment and health sciences field. And when I left, I really wanted to go into acting. So I went out to Los Angeles, and despite my mom's advice to get further education, take the entrance exam to get into a master's or something. Nonetheless, went to LA and I started personal training to pay the bills. And I did that. I had a background in sports, really just in high school, and dance and athletics. So I had a long time interest and curiosity of the human body. And so I did personal training. It felt like a natural fit. Loved chatting with people, loved being in the gym facility. So I did that to pay the bills. And the more that I did that, this thirst and quench for a better understanding of health and disease in the human body continued to grow. And simultaneously, I saw how challenging that was as to make it as an actor. And there's only so many Clooneys in the world, right? I said, hey, I'd like to have a family and a house one day. And that was a struggle. But really the awareness and clarity about health, disease, that experience through training. And for a while when I went out there, and as that was growing, all I was aware about was allopathic medicine and having an MD. And simultaneously, I had a grandfather back in Virginia who went through the typical diabetic course, had that toe amputated, then half the foot, below the knee, and then above the knee. And watching that and seeing him struggle with that as my awareness and curiosity and in the human body, it left me continuing to seek. And again, all I knew was allopathic medicine. I ultimately discovered osteopathic medicine. Light bulb kind of went off based on the tendency and the approach. And so that's when I said, hey, I'm gonna go to med school and pursue this route here.
So there's two or three things that you just brought out that I do want to touch on. We're going to talk about osteopathic medicine here in just a second, because I think there are lots of listeners who don't necessarily realize there's maybe two separate tenets and how they're related but different than what they may traditionally see from an MD perspective. So don't let me forget that spot. But the acting thing is also really interesting that you bring this up. So I don't know if you've had a chance to read or listen to Viola Davis in her memoir, Finding Me.
I haven't yet.
Okay. So for anyone who's listening, if you've not had a chance to read this, it is a phenomenal, interesting, completely relatable story about all of the things that helped develop her into who we see today on television and movies. One of the things that's interesting about it is that she as she's narrating, if you listen to the audio version, her voice is very distinctive and it lends itself very well to narration. She starts to talk about acting just in general, and she makes it very clear that 95% of actors are unemployed. And you kind of think about that and you go, wow, that's a huge unemployment number, right? Then she goes on to say, of the actors that are employed, only 1% of total actors out there, so 95% are unemployed, 5% of people are working, 1% makes over $50,000 a year. And so as you're thinking about, I got to put food on the table, I got to have something that's going to let me eat and take care of people. If you're not in that 1%, well, first, if you're not out of the 95%, you got to have something else to do. But if you're not in that 1%, it's still not necessarily something that leads to what we would consider to be a typical lifestyle, right? And so it's just interesting to hear you say that, because you got to have, you're kind of evidence. You got to have something else to do out there. But we're gonna stay in California for a while, because I think there's a lot of fun stuff in California. But can you talk a little bit about osteopathic medicine, please, and help people understand some of the differences between that and allopathic medicine?
Sure. I think so. At the time when I discovered it, there were basic tenets that talked about the body has the capacity to heal itself when you put it in the right setting. And it talked about the influence of structure of the human body. So from a musculoskeletal posture standpoint, and the influence of internal physiological cord and the impact on the organs there. And that's really the experience through personal training I had kind of appreciated. And it spoke to me more at that standpoint. Now, however, I will say the trainings are so merged at these days as far as residency. It takes a strong effort, I think, for somebody leaving an osteopathic program to continue to nurture, whether it's, that hands-on, but osteopathy, I describe to people, hey, it's like a combination of your physical therapist or chiropractor or massage therapist with your allopathic physician. You've got a little bit more tools in your belt. We spend a little bit of time working on putting your hands, the therapeutic role of putting your hands on that musculoskeletal system and manipulating what's going on.
You talk about when you're moving to California, I kind of chuckle because your mom's like, hey, are you sure this is what you want to do? You're like, yes, this is what I'm going to do. But you've done this with, in the background, though, formal training in acting and dance. And from what I understand, you actually have a talented family, right? Your sister is a singer. Is that right?
Yeah, Miss Mandy Band, yeah.
And I am convinced you're a singer too. You just don't know it yet.
She got all the talent when it comes to vocals. Yeah, got all of it. No, not here.
Got all the vocals.
Yeah. Now, if you want me to drop a couple bars here, yeah.
At any time.
Yeah, is that right? Okay, anytime.
But you also you dance, and specifically tap dance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Did right. This is not something I've been able to nurture for a while. But I didn't have any choice. I remember having any say into it. But as a kid, I was the middle of three kids. And I think for a year or two, my older brother started, and then I started, and my sister started. My brother probably tapped out, no pun intended, after a couple of years, right? And it's something I stuck with. And then as I continued to play other sports growing up, that just continued to be one of my after-school programs. I had a good family mix of friends, and then eventually one of my best friends ended up joining me. And we did this, oh goodness, through probably 16, 17 years of age. We were probably teaching towards the end more hip hop classes. But yeah, tap dance is a lost art. It's fun. And in being able to see, I think as I got into college and what I wanted to study, that awareness about how that the crossover, when we talk about cross training for different athletics, that proprioception and that helped, I think, with skill sets translate on and off to different sports.
I was going to go to proprioception. I think that definitely has to be a benefit of doing something as complex as tap. Are you sure you don't have a pair of shoes with taps in the closet somewhere? Am I gonna have to find Steph to go and look for these things?
Yeah, I've threatened my kids to say, hey, we're gonna everybody's gonna take tap dance until you're better than dad, and then you can tap out if you want to.
And then you did hip hop dance?
We did a little bit towards the end there. That was fun. But in those years, like I was, anybody that's danced competitively, no, I was nowhere good at that. We would go to competitions every now and then, and they would always write on the scorecards, needs more ballet, needs more finesse. So that was a good exercise. It was something that would still challenge me like any other sport at that time as a kid.
Yeah.
So I found it a good challenge, and in retrospect, see the value of how that's kind of led me to where I am.
Yeah, but then you walked away. You sure you're not going to go back and have some classes and pick it up? You'd be better than everybody else.
Well, see, I'll say that I will. I think when I'm looking, when I'm looking for another, maybe it's not golf in retirement. Maybe that's what it is.
Fair enough. So, did you have acting jobs when you were in LA?
Well, I did. Let's see. I had fun. I had a few, many probably unpaid, maybe a few that were paid. Let's see, probably nothing that you're going to see. There was a 90210 show. I was a background in a peach pit.
What? Really?
Yeah, there was that. There was a couple of contests where kids, directors would put together contests for like Orbits or different commercials. I remember filming on the beach at one time. Hey, felt great. I don't even know if I was paid for that gig or not, but it was fun to say I was out there doing that. And I think, the one you referred to earlier was Battle Dome. Not really an acting gig per se, so much as an athletic competition, but they wanted to see somebody with a loud mouth or flair that would be, I guess, watchable on TV.
So did you have an agent?
I did not. That's what I was seeking with that. So as a personal trainer, I was personal training in LA Fitness my first year out there, and TNT network had come up with their version of American Gladiator. It was called Battle Dome.
Okay.
And the first year, the guy that won it was walking around our gym just saying, hey guys, this is the second year we're having it. We're looking for people to come try it out. And I said, and he actually, after having won it, he got an agent, got a part in the movie Fight Club. And as a 22-year-old, that spoke to me, hey, this is it. This is what I'm doing. So I showed up, I think, on a weekend to where this tryout was. And it was like a combine. It felt like an NFL combine camp. There were incredible athletes there, and they put you through a battery of exercise, and they sit you down in front of a camera and want to see more or less how obnoxious you can be. And I guess I passed that test and got to compete with the show. But that was probably not something I would do having kids these days. It was quite the experience. Yeah, they brought us on, had an attorney come in the room and say, hey, you got to sign this waiver. You might die, might suffer dismemberment, but you can't sue, kind of thing. And as a 22, I signed it and didn't think twice about it. I was just, yeah, let's do this. And of course, they kind of pitch you. I think I was a wet 190 pounds, and they pitch you against these 280, monsters. 300. Yes. Yeah.
And your monster was?
Mr. Terry Crews was one of them. Yes, Mr. Terry Crews. It's still great to see his progress. It still excites me when I see him in different things. He really has. He's done well. But yeah, his character name was T Money at the time.
Yeah. T Money.
Yeah.
So it's funny that they put you in front of camera and they try to figure out, are you obnoxious enough that people are going to want to watch you?
Yeah.
And your claim to fame is yes, I was. Right.
That's it. Yeah.
And then you get paired up with T Money, Terry Crews, and you guys do this show. So like I have seen Battle Dome like way back in the day.
Okay.
But like just tell folks, because people may either not remember or may never have seen it. Like talk a little bit about like how this all shook out. Like what did you end up doing? How did it go in battling with Terry Crews? I mean, you're still alive. This is good because you signed the waiver saying you might die. Yeah. So what was that day? Did it film in one day or was it over multiple days?
We filmed it in one day, but they had, each show would have 3 contestants on it.
Okay.
And the first time I went, I was actually a backup contestant. Right? No, backup contestant in case somebody didn't make it through an event. Somebody had to leave on a stretcher, which happened. I saw some people getting carried out on stretchers and ambulance. And so we kind of went and observed the first time. And the second time, you come back as an contestant. Yes, they film it all day and didn't have any family or friends out there. So they would bus in these kids from schools around and they were just going nuts. And it was a great, I definitely had the adrenaline running, exciting environment. But there were 5 different events. Okay. Each event you compete with against this humongous gladiator type of person, and each one was 60 seconds. Let's see, I think
you can do anything for 60 seconds.
That's what I feel like. Yeah, I did. My body's telling me, I feel like there's days when my body's still paying for it. But I think the one with Terry Crews was actually some cage. It was a cylinder cage that was circling off the ground, had 2 openings on either side of it. And his goal was to throw, and he did. He threw most people out of that. And you got points if you threw him out. And then it was kind of a stalemate if you both fall out. And so I hung on to him for dear life. And I think we both fell out at some point. And then there was another kind of smaller arena where there's a big basket in the middle of it. And you're supposed to run past this guy and drop a big heavy medicine ball into it. And yeah, it was chaos. It was chaos. Those were 60 seconds when you're really fighting for your life.
That is amazing. So your wife and I were talking about it because apparently there is a VHS tape of that particular episode that maybe your mother has. And so Steph is on the hunt. She's going to find this thing.
Yeah, if my wife was a little bit more IT savvy, I was actually in probably 7-8 years ago at the place where I worked, a pharmacist who was pretty savvy when I shared that story with him. He purchased it off Amazon. I guess there's so many seasons on it. He dug in and found the right way. He purchased the whole season just to watch the clip. So I showed up to work. I think it was on my birthday, and Yeah, he embarrassed me in front of the staff and said, "Hey, we got a little video we wanted to show you there."
Well, if mom has the tape, then we're just short one VHS player and some type of converter contraption to get it to plug into a television, and we're all watching it.
Hey, fair enough. Fair enough. We'll put it in the home theater, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's interesting to think a little bit about all those things that really form how you think about things today and have given you those experiences. And, back to the beginning of kind of where we started, we talked about a spouse, and we've talked a little bit now about the health span enthusiast part, but your other descriptor was father. And so I know that you and the family just got back from the ski trip of champions with the children.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about the kids and kind of how you're thinking about as you watch them grow and develop. Are you thinking about, oh, this is not good for them, or this is not optimal, we got to do something different? Like, talk a little bit about how you think about it, considering all the things you've now seen and where you are in your career.
Sure. So first I'll preface this with, I had nieces and nephews before I had kids.
Okay.
And I've had to take my foot out of my mouth so many times before having kids, saying, I'm never going to let my kid eat that, or I'm never going to let my kid watch that screen, or so to speak. So I'm still human. But to your point is, we're all trying to operate at our highest level of understanding. And I've got a 9, a 7, and a 3-year-old, all healthy kids. Super lucky from that standpoint. My oldest is our son. The younger two are females, and they continue to challenge me. Oh, yeah, they continue to challenge me, but it is exciting to see their growth. But understanding that human body, and particularly how imminent those, from time to the womb to out of the womb, and through adolescence and ongoing, it's that constant awareness of, am I putting my kids in the right environment, right? Am I putting the right things in front of them to help support and nurture and help them grow? So it's fun. By no means can I say I'm perfect. By no means can I say I'm perfect or flawless on it, but it's been exciting. One thing that is, I think, vastly different, and people, it's, I think, a bit easier to chat with now, but my wife and I were plant-based before we had kids. Mm-hmm. As far as dietary nutrition, and our kids predominantly are. They'll have a few eggs a week, and outside of that, we eat predominantly plants. And that was really tough, particularly for my family members, right? To say, hey, that's not how, we were raised. Why are you doing that? And I think it's some people, depending on where they are on the continuum paradigm, may think that's child punishment, cruel and unusual. But it literally is falling into, hey, just operating at my highest level of understanding. And when we look at the human body and performance and longevity, I say, hey, nutrition's our biggest therapeutic tool, right? Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that because I'm not eating fast food takeout every day that my diet is fine or okay, and it's not going to impact that longevity. I think there really is a continuum of, hey, what's the impact of this long term? No different than my consistency in exercise, or consistency in prioritizing restorative sleep, managing stress, that gastrointestinal environment. So yeah, coming back to a kid, that part has been fun. When we were, first transitioning the kid from breastfeeding to its first foods, fortunately at that point, Stephanie and I already had a good understanding about nutrition in the human body. And I say fortunately because it's a lot easier to change the nutrition of a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 5-year-old than it is a 55, 65, 70-year-old. Mm-hmm. And so from that standpoint, I feel like as a parent, my highest responsibility is to influence that, set their brain up for success. And mm-hmm. with regards to nutrition, that palate and that awareness of food until they're about 14, 15, right? When they can ride around with friends at 16 or they've got their license, then they can go through the drive-thru on their own, right? And not tell mom and dad. And my job is relatively over. So I feel like we've done a reasonable job in a 21st world century. I think we've done a reasonable job setting our kids up for success from a nutrition and dietary standpoint.
But I think that's really important. And maybe you're underplaying it just a little bit, right? Because I do think that the habits that we form very early are the habits that we take with us,
Yeah.
right? And although we may vary a little bit in how we approach those habits, and we may vary and maybe experiment a little bit, ultimately what you're truly familiar with and kind of what you ate when you were small and how you approach food over the longer term are really rooted in those early days. And so being cognizant of that and really thinking about how you want them to approach nutrition and kind of putting that there, I think is actually very important. In my comings and goings, I've met people who have had really strange, what I would consider to be really strange or different ways of approaching just food in general. And it's likely because that's their early experiences were really rooted in those types of things. And once the taste palette forms and you're kind of like, this is normal for me, it is very difficult to undo that.
I agree, but I always save room for that Pavlovian experience. And I tell people, this occurred to me when I was in LA, right? And I've been raised in Southern rural Virginia. My diet was what it was, right? Mm-hmm. And when I got out to California, I was like, oh, this is what an avocado looks like. This is what they, grow out here. And, but if I tell people it takes a couple consecutive disciplined decisions, right? I want the salad, not the brownies, or I want the greens, I want this. You do that several consecutive times, you eventually learn to train that brain, and you can find yourself salivating for this healthy, nutrient-dense food that was not very palatable in the past. But it's the consistency with it, and then vice versa. My diet's been plant-based 12, 14 years, but a couple of times when we come around to Halloween to New Year's, rocking and rolling going into it, go see the family for Thanksgiving, and I have something decadent, I can just have it once. And sometimes I can just have it once periodically and move on. But when I sneak back in a little bit more frequently, some of those decadent foods, it oftentimes I'm looking back saying, what happened?
It's amazing how hard it is to undo it once you do it, right? And so I am not the best at overall nutrition. I think I am better than average, just based on what I know about average, right? But there are things that I really, really enjoy, and if I decide that I'm going to have this thing, sometimes it can be a 2-3 week episode where I have got to figure out how not to have it anymore. And so, you've laughed at me before because one of the things for me is gas station honey buns. Okay. They aren't even that good.
Right.
But there's something about the way they taste and the texture that over like months will go by and I'm like, ooh, maybe I'm going to stop here and grab a honey bun, right? So I grab a honey bun and I have a bite and it's not great, but I'm like, well, maybe the second bite will remind me why I wanted this thing, right? And now I'm 2-3 bites, and then I'm like, well, that wasn't so bad. And then the next day I'm like, you know what? Maybe I want a honey bun. And it takes a while before you realize, before you can convince yourself, no honey bun today, and you go back to being normal. So I appreciate that because I know that's how that works.
Yeah, it is. Now I can say I've had the same thing with IPA beers. Oh my goodness. I was introduced to those during my residency in Cleveland, and I can go days, weeks, months without it, and then at some point convince myself that, hey, I'll have that sip. And then usually first time, don't really enjoy it, but that change in the taste buds and probably more to the gastrointestinal biome is, hey, where's that second? Where's that the next day and the next day?
Yeah, that's it's interesting for me because that's how it is about a lot of things. A few years ago, I started becoming very interested in bourbon, and no matter what you do, the first sip of bourbon, no matter what it is kind of like gasoline. You're like, oh. Yeah. But then it's that second sip that you start to actually taste it, and you're like, yeah, this is really good. And so recently, I was introduced to Irish whiskey, and that has become one of those things where, wow, there's so many subtle differences in the way Irish whiskey tastes, and there's this difference between that and traditional American bourbon. And then that led me to think, well, maybe I can actually learn about wine. So, and so I've been experimenting a little bit, tasting, trying to understand the differences in the taste in wine. Now, it's not one of those things where I actually, and Kate will laugh at me because I order things when we go out just because I want to taste it. So I'll say, oh, I want a glass of this, and I'll sip it. I'm like, oh, this is great, and I put it aside, right? But it's all about how you're thinking about the process before you start the process,
Yeah.
and what you're expecting to get out of it. And if you understand nutritionally what you're taking in, it's a lot different than if you're not understanding it and you're just going out for what tastes good or whatever it is that you're trying to get.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, we're all humans, right? When I'm really clear and objective, we're looking at food as far as saying, hey, what does that offer my body on a cellular level to help better sleep, be in a better mood, perform next day, next workout? But we're all humans, and coming back to taste is learned behavior. Nobody likes coffee or alcohol the first time they have it, but man, if they're not a mainstay in America, right?
Persevere.
Yeah.
Carson, your practice, are you guys accepting new patients?
We are. So certainly my wife more so. She's got just starting here, and she's growing consistently, but she probably has a further room to grow to full capacity than myself. But still expecting new patients. And when I look at it, it's there's two components to it, right? It's always two hats that I'm battling. There's the provider side of me that really loves to dig in and loves the challenge, particularly when I can anticipate where this is going to go in either usually in a conventional setting. There's a lot of very similar providers that are outside of the box who approach things similarly, but as a provider, heartstrings will get kind of pulled. Hey, I can help this person, right? Hey, I can really help this person. And then there's the business side that says, hey, what's scalable? Where's your time and effort going to be spent? What's that return on it? And it does take a lot of mental currency to wrap your head around something that's pretty complex, and to have enough encounters over an acute period of time to really say, okay, we're on the right path. Maybe some things work, some doesn't, and being able to navigate that and course correct, as opposed to, hey, I've got Artis Beatty who's healthy and I want 100 of them, and I just see it once every quarter, right? Those are still fun, still we're working on optimization of mental and physical performance. That's exciting, but the other one I feel like keeps me more relevant and does help challenge it. And so trying to find that right balance of what doesn't exhaust me and I can still offer value. Right. My passion going into medicine stemmed from that personal training. It was really centered around weight loss. When I went out, I said, hey, I want to help people manage weight and lose weight. And after finishing a residency in internal medicine, I did an addiction medicine fellowship. And most people, certainly from the medical side in residency, was with the idea of you're going to practice addiction medicine. But it was more for me to learn about the human brain and environmental influences. And that's oftentimes we're just talking about, hey, it's the bourbon or it's the IPA or it's the holidays, and from a food standpoint, how that brain works and how we're driven by it. I think that's helped. I'm not by any means a master, but that certainly has helped shape my paradigm and how I approach people, and hopefully leads to some of the success that we have.
I really, really appreciate you taking the time to spend with me, because I know you guys are extremely busy. I mean, in talking to you, I know you've been spending some time in the office doing things behind the scenes over the weekends. You just got back from a trip. We've going through the holiday period. I mean, there's a lot going on. So it means a lot that you would spend the time with me.
Oh, thank you.
That you are taking new patients, though, is exciting because some of the listeners are local. And so I'll try to put information around your practice in there so they can find it if they want. And I think some of the information you've given us around what your practice does and how it's maybe different than where people go today may actually be very, very helpful. And, I plan on getting to talk to Steph a little bit too at some point, but I have to have you back, and maybe I'll have you guys together after you've been in practice together more than a week, and we can see how that's really going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, Artis, I really am honored. I appreciate you inviting me to be a part of here, and it's been such a joy getting to know you and learn more about your path as well.
Carson, thanks again. And thank you everyone for listening. Stay tuned. Make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss it when we post a new episode. And we'll all talk again soon on our show.